Hey, so I'm here recording today to talk about understanding the AOs. These are the assessment objectives that are really central to understanding how to craft essays that get marks for AQA, Edexcel, and OCR exam boards in particular. So understanding the AOs is something that each student should do as one of the first things that they do when they're starting to revise for their exams, because they want to know that they are writing to meet these assessment objectives. And honestly, a lot of students avoid this because it's scary. It's scary thinking about the AOs. They seem like these obscure, rigid things that are really hard to understand and implement. So that's why I'm going to break it down like I do with my students for you in this video. So this is my method for understanding the AOs, the assessment objectives that are required of students at GCSE level. So the first assessment objective that you have to understand is AO1. I like to think of AO1 as answer obviously. This means that you are addressing the question directly, always making sure that you are actually answering the question, linking back to that question, having a strong opinion on whatever the question is asking of you, and using evidence to your advantage. So that means selecting good quotes. It means that you need to have a good bank of quotes prepared that you can draw on that will relate to a number of themes that could come up in the exam. So you need to have good quotes, you need to link to the question, and you need to really be able to show the examiner that you have a strong understanding of the text by being able to select your evidence well and answer that question with confidence. So for example, you might show your AO1 knowledge by writing a line like this. When Macbeth says, "Is this a dagger which I see before me?" it shows his mind is disturbed and he is uncertain about killing Duncan. So right away, you're showing you have a comprehensive understanding of the text, you're using good evidence that relates to the question, and you are linking to the question in some way. So when we're talking about AO2, we're talking about how to explain what language is doing. So this means knowing a wide range of literary techniques. Something that I make sure my students have is a strong understanding of literary devices, juxtaposition, metaphor, symbolism, motifs, alliteration, onomatopoeia, the list goes on, and an understanding of the effects that these literary devices have in a book, that they have in a play, that they have in a poem. And being able to really say, identify where the writer is using imagery, symbolism, or a certain method, and be able to link that back to the theme or the character or the impact on the audience, how the writer is using this to have an effect on the audience or an effect on the reader. So, for example, when we're analyzing the imagery of the dagger in Shakespeare's Macbeth, we're going to think about the inner conflict. We're going to think about the symbolism that represents for him. The image symbolizes temptation and guilt, and Shakespeare is using this to show Macbeth's descent into moral corruption. So you need to be able to take that evidence and cut it up and dice it up into little pieces, identify literary devices, and show that you understand how to analyze the text in detail. That's AO2. Analyze obsessively. Then we have AO3. So I like to think of AO3 as answer outside. This means thinking outside of the text, thinking beyond the text, outside the book. So an examiner wants to see that you have an understanding of the history, of the period that this book was written in, and you're able to make inferences about what this book would have done, how this play would have been received in the context, in the historical context of where it was written and when it was written. So you need to have an understanding of the ideas and the culture in England at the time the text was written. This is English literature. So it's about thinking about how these books have impacted our culture, right? Have impacted our way of being even today. So sometimes when I encourage students to think about answering outside, it's thinking about the context of the day back then when the text was written, and thinking about the context of now. How do we receive the messages of the play today as well? So this can also lead to comparison with other texts. That can give you some really high marks. You can think about texts like the Bible that have had a massive influence as well. You can think about other texts written by the same author, and think about your wider knowledge of literature, your wider knowledge of history outside of the book, in order to really impress on AO3, answer outside. So an AO3 sentence looks something like this. In Shakespeare's time, belief in the supernatural was strong. The dagger vision, along with the witches, would have seemed like real forces of evil leading Macbeth to sin, which reinforces the play's warning about ambition and the disruption of the natural order. So you need to have a strong historical understanding and be able to demonstrate that. So AO1, AO2, and AO3, they are the bones of your essay. So you need to be aware, especially for AQA, of how to integrate all of these into one paragraph. If you're with another exam board, you need to know which question is assessing for which. So for Edexcel, for example, some questions only assess for AO2, some questions assess for AO2 and AO3. AO1 is generally always present. But you need to know, according to your exam board, what assessment objective is needed for which question. That's why tailored help can really help. That's why tuition works, because students need this, right? Students need to have someone to walk them through, to help them understand how to write to meet assessment objectives for each question. So one thing that I do with my students is paragraph scaffolding. So I will look at how to create paragraphs that truly meet all of these assessment objectives, particularly for AQA essays, where they are expected to respond to questions in a way that assesses all three of these at the same time. So in order to create a strong paragraph that integrates AO1, AO2, and AO3, I tend to give my students a scaffold like this, which helps them to understand how they can really meet these assessment objectives in a straightforward way. So using the scaffold, Shakespeare presents a certain theme or character or idea as, what's your point here, right? What are you getting at? This is shown when the character says, and then you give your solid evidence. The use of the specific technique you've picked out from this evidence that you're going to be able to analyze suggests that, and then you talk about the meaning or the effect of this technique. Then you go deeper into your analysis of the meaning or effect of the technique and say that what it highlights or what it reveals about the character or the theme. And then you can go even deeper and you can say it also does this. And then you can come to your AO3 context and you think about, okay, what impact is it having on the audience at the time? Well, for Shakespeare's audience in Jacobean England, we would have been thinking about this and this and this. This would have made them think twice about, and this reflects the message that Shakespeare wanted to get across to his audience. Therefore, Shakespeare presents, and then you come back to a solid AO1 point if you really want to impress and link back again. So this is the kind of scaffold that you can follow. You want to save it for later and give it a go. This ensures that you are actually getting AO1, AO2, and AO3 into your essay. So here is an example paragraph written by one of my students using this essay scaffold, the scaffolding technique to get all of the AOs into their essay. So you can see highlighted in red for AO1, you can see highlighted in pink here for AO2, and you can see highlighted in sort of blue-purple here for AO3. And we tend to work like this. It helps my students sometimes to color code their work and to follow these scaffolds to know that they are really writing essays that hit all of these assessment objectives. and it's clear to them, and they're preparing for the exam in a targeted, strategic way by understanding the assessment objectives and really seeing them highlighted in their work and knowing they're hitting those marks as they write. So I hope this was helpful. I hope you have a clearer idea of what the assessment objectives are, specifically for AQA and Edexcel, but also for other exam boards too. And I hope that you can implement some of this in your child's revision, and do not hesitate to get in touch if they need some tailored help getting together essays that get marks for GCSE in a way that doesn't stress them out and feels manageable. Let's break it down. They can do this. So thanks for watching, and again, hope it helped. Hit the like button, hit the follow button if this content is useful to you, and let me know what you think in the comment section below.